Hey everyone, I hope you guys are having a great morning. Wanted to hop on, get a second video out today, and I wanted to talk to you guys who are in Christian leadership in any way, shape, form, or capacity. So that could be pastors, evangelists, apostles, whoever this is, right? And also I wanted to talk to those of you guys who are couples or parents. So this could apply to a bunch of different people. And here's the concept that I wanted to throw out to you guys. What is the culture that you are facilitating in either your church, your business, or your home environment? Right? And I wanted to talk to you guys about one of the concepts that I feel like made David so powerful in a lot of ways. Now, David was a guy who he made some big mistakes and did a lot of stuff wrong. But one of David's more redeeming qualities that I think that he had was regarding the way that he created a culture of honor and chose a lot of the time to do things God's way rather than just trying to take vengeance and do things in a dishonoring way and for himself, right? And I want to tell you, leaders especially, that the culture that you facilitate is one of the greatest examples that you could ever leave and teach to the people and the influence that is receiving from you. So whether that's your kiddos in a home environment, moms and dads, whether that's, you're a leader of a ministry or a movement, or you're a leader in your workplace, culture matters. It absolutely matters. And our job is to make sure that we are biblically aligned with different principles that the Bible talks about. Amen. And so I wanted to read you guys a little passage from the book of 2 Samuel today and show you guys something that David consistently demonstrated with his character that was a really, really good quality, right? So let me read to you guys starting in 2 Samuel chapter 4, starting in verse 7. It says, "Now when they entered the house, he was lying on his bed in his bedroom, and they not only struck and killed him, but they also beheaded him. Then they took his head and traveled all night by the way of Arabah. They brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron, and he said to the king, 'Look, the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, your enemy, who sought your life. Thus the Lord has granted my lord the king vengeance this day on Saul and on his descendants.' David replied to Reshab and Baanah his brother, the sons of Rimmah the Beerites, and said to them, 'As the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life from everyday adversity, when a man told me, behold, Saul is dead, thinking he was bringing good news, I seized and killed him in Ziklag to reward him for his news. How much more when wicked men have killed a righteous and a just man in his own house on his bed, shall I not require his blood from your hand and remove you from the earth?' So David commanded his young men, and they killed them and cut off their hands and feet and hung them beside the pool in Hebron. But they took Ishbosheth's head and buried it in Hebron in the tomb of Abner, his relative." Okay, let's pause and talk about kind of some backstory with this, okay? So David was in a very, very unique position with this, where these two men decided that they were going to go, thinking that it was a good thing, to go and to cut off this guy's head, Ishbosheth, who was kind of considered David's direct rival at the time. And so they went without consulting David, and they just kind of murdered this guy. And they were thinking that they were going to get praised by David. So they prance in before David, and they go, "Look at this cool thing that we did. We just went and we cut off the head of this person who, is a direct rival of yours." And David's response speaks volumes. He was like, "That wasn't your place to do that," right? And he gets on to them, and he basically punishes them for going after someone and for not allowing God to deal with the situation, right? Here's where I think that culture matters, okay? David consistently throughout his life, including with Saul was directly out to get him and did a lot of things wrong. David did not slander Saul in front of people. He did not take vengeance on his own. He did not publicly call Saul out and do a bunch of stuff. He did have direct conversations with Saul, and he said, "May the Lord deal with you," right? But he was very careful to facilitate, number one, a culture where he allowed God to take vengeance. He forgave, right? Number two, he facilitated a culture of honor. And he made sure that even when people, when Saul was directly coming against him, he would get on to people for talking badly about Saul. Isn't that interesting? You kind of see this concept throughout the book of 1 Samuel, right? And he even went back, a little bit later, we learned about Mephibosheth. He even tried to honor parts of Saul's family line because of his position and because of his title. And he always called him the Lord's anointed because God did initially anoint him. And yes, he did fall, and yes, he did do some bad stuff, but God was going to be the one to deal with him, right? And so David kind of created what I like to call a culture of safety around him, right? And he was very strict to enforce that culture of safety. He made sure that people felt respected. He made sure that people felt loved. He made sure that order was kept, right? He made sure that things were operating righteously through God's way, right? And he made sure to maintain that culture of honor, and he swiftly dealt with people who were unloving, who tried to take vengeance in their own strength, who were sowing seeds of dishonor and discord, right? And I think that personally is part of what led to his success. He trusted God to vindicate him. He was a hard worker, right? We see consistently that he won the favor of the people. And you know why I think that is? It spoke volumes of David's character. And I really do think that that's part of why the people trusted him, because he wasn't a people pleaser. He honored God first, but he was also very respectful and facilitated a culture that made it easy for people to follow in. Leaders, I want to talk to you guys for a second. Do you facilitate a culture where people around you feel loved, or do they feel disrespected? Do you facilitate a safe feeling culture? Do you facilitate a culture where you allow God to take vengeance? Do you facilitate a culture of forgiveness? Do you facilitate a culture where you do not allow slander 24/7, right? And these are important concepts that are still important for us to follow today. Amen. And so David experienced a great amount of success because he was very strict with keeping order around him and making sure that he was following things biblically with the way that he ran his kingdom as king. And I want to tell you guys, leaders, whatever your sphere of influence is, I always tell you guys that the greatest sermon that you will ever preach is the way that you live your life. It's not the words that you say behind a pulpit. People are watching you every single day of your life, and they're watching how you live more than what you say. And if you're facilitating a culture of slander, of taking vengeance on your own, if you're facilitating a culture of gossip, if you're facilitating a culture where people don't feel loved or safe to communicate or to talk through hard things without getting critical judgment and just being beat up on, if you're facilitating a culture that lacks accountability, leaders, we are going to be held accountable for this kind of stuff one day, whether you're parents with your kids or whether you're a leader of a ministry or a church or in the business sphere. Right? So I want to encourage you guys today to facilitate a culture of honor and to facilitate a culture that is done God's way. When you notice people starting to, act up under your sphere of influence, whether they're slandering people, whether they're promoting false things, leaders, we have a direct influence over the culture. Amen. And sometimes, people need to work things out for themselves. But when you notice things getting out of hand like David did, we have a responsibility, leaders, to step up and to make sure that our environments feel safe, that people feel loved, that there is accountability in certain circumstances, and that above else, we are allowing God to be honored and glorified, and that He is the one that is allowed to take vengeance over circumstances, and that we are keeping our hearts in the right place. Amen. So I'll leave you guys with that for today. I hope you guys have a great day. I'll chat with you again soon.